as David said a moment ago, members of the family, which of course is my position. A lot of this has to do with family and the fact that the human race is a lot older and a lot more complex and has a lot more cousins, running around various places that most people, because they've been kept in the dark, would be astonished to find out if it ever came out officially. Look, the main problem with governments, if you look back historically, 20 years, 50 years, 100, 1,000 years, the main problems governments and bureaucrats in governments are terrified about is when people become restive, when there are revolutions, when the orderly process of government does not take place. Look at how many times during our own elections someone on some network will make the comment that we have done it again, that we have peacefully handed power from one set of rulers to another. The reason they make that comment is because in our history, in our brief memory, going back only 6,000 years to Sumer, which is nothing on a galactic timescale, governments and peoples do not govern themselves peacefully. When you look at this, the history of the planet we own, maybe, if you look at the censored version of history we've been allowed to read, it is an unending cascade of tragedy, suppression, outright torture, outright enslavement of whole populations, and power groups vying back and forth for control. That is our history, power groups vying back and forth for control. Well, my approach to the disclosure idea is that if there's something as big as aliens, ETs, the family standing behind the false premise of history that we've been fed, and that were ever to come unravel so that most people would confront or be in a position or in a scenario where they were forced to confront our real history, how would it ever be handled? Given that we don't do these things well. Our history is that at the drop of a hat, we shoot people, we execute them, we guillotine them. Revolutions are not peaceful. So if in fact there is this huge revolution on the horizon where most of everything we think we know will turn out to either be just wrong or deliberately manipulated, because that's the big D, that's the biggest disclosure there is, that human history is not what we have been told. How would you manage? How would you create a context where there is some peaceful transition from the state of ignorance of the planet tonight to where a lot of key people in key positions, and those are the ones you worry about, are in a position of having information to where they can help this peaceful transition? So when I hear David go down the litany of all the weird stuff that's going on now, it is real. These events are taking place, and I think, David, you've assembled the dots in a very brilliant fashion. There's a lot more dots I could, throw in the mix. What really happened with that BP well in the Gulf? When you hear about what we have figured out, which is not the time or place this afternoon to discuss this, because I don't have the charts, I don't have the graphs, I don't have some of the data yet in a presentable form, it will blow your mind how, in fact, the BP incident, the accident, was not an accident at all. It's part of this plan, and it had pushback. There is a war. I'm very glad, David, you said it. There is a secret war going on. And every time I get on Coast, I bring out some examples, and I say to people, well, there's another example of the secret war. I think George is finally beginning to get the point that there's a secret war. Well, you have laid out a litany of data points. Yes, we are at war. But who is we, and who are we at war with? I think that's the bone of contention that Kerry is kind of raised here at the end, and I'd like to hear her expand a little more on that.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate your comments, and I'm sure the others do as well. I certainly agree that we are at war, and I think it's very, very important for people to realize that the sides, what they think are the sides, are very deceptive. I know that we have a group of white hats within the U.S. Government and in the agencies and so on that are operating very strongly, let's say. Some of them are not necessarily in agreement with each other, even as white hats. So that's a whole dynamic. And some of those people out there who have been following my blog will have seen the white hat releases recently in regard to the Falcone money. That is certainly a faction. It's a very high-level faction. And they are not, however, what I would say are the more radical, sort of constitutionalist-oriented group, although I realize that they are concerned about the American Constitution. There are white hats also, internationally speaking. But there is a group of individuals who do run this planet, and those individuals are linked with ETs, and some of them may be, more recently ET, as I said, Anunnaki, whatever. And I do not believe that the lower levels of government and these incidents that David is mentioning are quite so simply pointed to China. I have to also say that I had Sean David Morton on my radio show recently, and his sources gave a completely different explanation for the missile launch off of the California coast, and said that it actually came out of our side, one part of our side. And I have to say that to me is a lot more likely than China. And there's a number of reasons for that. Also the alien base that is undersea at Catalina Island and that area. There's a great deal going on. I actually live on the coast of California at the moment. And I can tell by the traffic that there is a great deal going on off the coast of California. And for a Chinese ship and a Chinese missile to be released there, regardless of the information you're getting, and I've heard all of that, I certainly reported on all of it on my blog, the dark-colored smoke, et cetera, But the lie is different at every level, as a well-known friend of ours has always said. And I have to say that was never more true than when we went into this whole missile situation. And we got military people on all different levels with different explanations. And I have to say the BP thing is also very, very important. There's an occult symbolism going on there that I know Richard is fully aware of. And I think it would be fascinating to get into some of those details, because I think that in terms of shots across the bow by certain ET groups that are at war with each other, and therefore we are involved in that war from different sides, that was one of the negative ET's major moves in the recent war that we're part of. So I will now turn this over. Let me see. I think that we can turn this over to Bill and see if he wants to come back with anything. Certainly, Bill, we are going to, by the way, we're going to allow people to ask questions fairly soon, but I would like to run down a few more things before we open up the floor here. So, Bill, I'm gonna put you on the screen here, and hopefully this will all go smoothly.
Okay, how are we doing? Can you hear me?
Okay, I think that you are loud and clear, but I need my technicians to basically verify that. Go ahead, Bill, talk.
Okay, that's fine. So things are starting to go smoothly now, and I have the feeling that we're only just started on a conversation that could last for 24 hours if we had the energy to do that, because everything connects with everything else. And, of course, this is one of the problems. There's such an enormous complexity that you can't just look at one part of it alone, and I think all of us would agree with that. What I would like to do here, simply in terms of what I find myself concerned about, and all of us are looking at different parts of